Imagine you're standing outside this just towering stone fortress in the Middle Ages. You've got an army, sure, but the walls are 50 feet high, 10 feet thick.
Yeah.
This was not a quick fight. I mean,
Right.
attacking a place like that was the ultimate test of endurance, organization, and just sheer engineering.
It really was. It was this fascinating conflict between offense and defense.
Hmm.
And what we call siege warfare. It wasn't really about winning a single battle.
Right.
It was about the long game.
Yeah.
The main goal was always to force the people inside to just surrender by cutting off every single one of their supplies.
So you turn the whole thing into a slow grinding starvation contest.
Exactly. And to make that happen, you needed brains, not just, brawn.
Hmm.
The engineers were crucial, often the highest paid people in the whole campaign.
Wow.
They had to design and build these massive, complicated machines right there outside the walls, knowing that these sieges could drag on for
More
months.
than years, right?
Or even years. It was an organizational nightmare. I mean, if you want to talk about engineering brilliance, we have to start with the real giant of destruction.
The trebuchet.
The Trebuchet, a marvel of medieval physics.
And it's that reliance on a counterweight that's so interesting. So this is all leverage, pure physics. How did it actually work?
Well, it moved away from older designs that used tension, like a giant crossbow. The trebuchet worked using a massive counterweight,
Just a huge box of rock.
a huge box filled with earth and stones, sometimes weighing tens of thousands of pounds. And it would drop rapidly down a chute.
And that drop converts all that potential energy into kinetic energy. Swinging that long wooden arm up, the force must have been staggering.
It was. At the end of that arm was a sling, and when the arm hit the top of its arc, the sling would release the projectile with just incredible force and speed.
And it would go high, right, to come crashing down on top of the walls.
Exactly, to maximize the damage.
Yeah.
And the scale of these things, they could be over 50 feet tall, usually built right there on site with whatever timber was around.
So when you say they had to be precise, are we talking about the difference between a successful breach and the whole machine just, collapsing into a pile of wood?
Absolutely. The builders needed almost impossible precision. If your angles were off by even a little bit, the stress from that dropping counterweight could literally tear the machine apart. But if you built it well, you got something revolutionary. Repetition. You could hit the exact same spot on a stone wall again and again until it just crumbled.
That's the key, isn't it? Structural fatigue. You just keep hammering one joint until the whole thing fails. Okay, let's talk about what they were throwing.
Well, the most common projectile was large rounded stones, sometimes up to 300 pounds.
300 pounds.
But that was just the start. To spread fear and start fires, they'd launch barrels of burning tar, or even the famous Greek fire.
That terrifying oil mister that was almost impossible to put out.
Exactly. Yeah. But for pure, vile psychological warfare, they got really inventive.
Oh, this is the gross part.
This is the gross part.
Yeah.
We have records of them catapulting dead animals, filth, anything to spread disease and terror. The goal was to make it just uninhabitable in there.
So while the trebuchet is handling that long-distance game, you also had the direct approach.
The battering ram, the close quarters attack tool. And it demanded incredible bravery from the guys operating it.
And its purpose was pretty straightforward, right? Just break down the heavy wooden doors or maybe find a weak spot in the lower wall?
Yeah, it was basically a giant tree trunk, often with a heavy iron head shaped like a ram, suspended by chains inside its own little protective house.
And that structure was vital because it was there to protect the crew, wasn't it?
It was. It was often covered in wet animal hides, like sodden leather, to stop defenders from setting the whole thing on fire.
So you have a team of strong guys inside just swinging this log back and forth like a pendulum, building up momentum. Boom.
Again and again, but they were in extreme danger. Defenders up on the walls would be dropping rocks, logs, even boiling liquids right down on top of them.
Trying to smash the roof in or kill the operators inside?
Despite that, it was still the most direct way to try and get in at ground level.
Okay, so if you can't smash your way through the gate, you have to find another way in. So the first alternative was going over the top.
Right. Which brings us to the siege tower.
These were just massive wooden structures built to be the exact same height as the castle wall.
Literally. They were on wheels, pushed slowly into position by soldiers, or sometimes even pulled by oxen. It let you completely bypass climbing ladders under fire.
They were basically moving fortresses.
That's a perfect way to put it. The front face, the side facing the castle, was covered in thick metal plates, or those soaked animal skins again for protection.
Made them hard to burn.
Very hard to burn. And the moment of truth came when it finally reached the wall. A folding bridge would drop down.
Like a reverse drawbridge.
Exactly. Allowing soldiers who were protected right up to the last second to just swarm across and fight the defenders face to face on the ramparts.
Okay, so you can't smash through, you can't go over. I guess the next move is to go under.
Which leads us to the hidden, dangerous work known as sapping.
Sapping just meant digging tunnels, right? Mines, directly underneath the castle foundations.
Yes, and the miners who did this were highly skilled tradesmen, not usually your frontline soldiers. They'd dig deep, propping up the tunnel with wooden beams as they went.
And they had to be incredibly precise. Once they were directly under a key part of the wall, what then?
They'd fill that space with flammable stuff, dry brush, oil, anything, and light it on fire. When those wooden props burned away, the ground would just collapse,
And the wall would come tumbling down with it.
creating a massive breach for the army to pour right through.
That sounds absolutely terrifying for the people inside, knowing someone could be digging under your feet at any moment. How could they even defend against that?
Well, they tried to listen for the digging sounds. There's a famous technique where they would place bowls of water on the ground in basements.
And they'd watch for ripples.
They'd watch for ripples. It told them there was digging going on underneath. If they found a tunnel, they would dig their own countermine to intercept them.
And then they'd fight underground.
Brutal, suffocating battles in these dark, cramped tunnels, sometimes with just daggers and tools.
Wow. It all sounds so grueling for the attackers. But life inside the castle for the defenders? That must have been just as brutal.
Oh, even more so. I mean, castle architecture itself was a defensive masterpiece. The walls were thick, obviously, but they had clever designs.
Like that slope at the bottom, the talus.
The talus, exactly.
Yeah.
It was ingenious because it didn't just deflect stones from a trebuchet, it helped absorb the energy and shatter them.
And the archers had a huge advantage, shooting from those narrow slits.
Yeah, or loops, yeah. You're almost completely covered by 10 feet of stone.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the wooden galleries that hung over the walls, the hoardings.
So they could drop things, rocks, boiling pitch directly onto anyone trying to get to the base of the wall.
Right, and of course you had moats or deep ditches, which were essential. They stopped battering rams and siege towers from even getting close.
And the gatehouse, the most obvious weak point, was probably the most heavily defended part of the whole castle.
A masterpiece of layered defense. You had the heavy iron grate, the portcullis, thick wooden doors behind that, and murder holes above to rain down death on anyone trapped between them.
But even with all that, the hardship of being trapped inside was immense. The food would start to run out.
We have some grim historical records. People forced to eat rats, their own horses. The detail about eating leather boiling tanned, hides for a few calories, that tells you everything.
And clean water was strictly rationed.
Always. And disease would just spread like wildfire in those crowded, unsanitary conditions. Plus, the psychological stress. Imagine the constant noise of 300-pound stones slamming into the wall every hour, every day.
You'd just be waiting for it to finally give way.
It's important to remember, though, that the attackers struggled too. They were living in these sprawling, temporary camps, suffering from bad weather and disease themselves. It was a mutual test of misery.
And to endure that misery, you needed organization on a monumental scale. That supply chain.
Oh, it was everything. Winning a siege was a logistics game. For an army of 10,000 men, you'd need thousands of tons of grain and meat just to last a month.
Not to mention all the other supplies. You needed blacksmiths constantly repairing armor, sharpening weapons.
But more importantly, forging new parts for the siege engines that were always breaking under the strain. And carpenters, working around the clock, building ladders, towers, the shoring for the mines.
But if your supply lines were cut, you were done. The attackers could starve just as easily as the defenders.
Organization was just as vital as courage, and communication was key for both sides.
How would defenders signal for help?
They used polished mirrors or shields to reflect sunlight during the day or huge bonfires at night. Just simple signals to let allies know they were still holding out.
And the attackers used horns and drums to coordinate their assaults.
Exactly. And for longer messages, they relied on brave messengers sneaking through the lines, or sometimes even trained pigeons.
Eventually, though, it had to end. How did a siege typically conclude?
It could happen a few ways. Often, the defenders would just negotiate a surrender. They knew a relief army wasn't coming, they were out of food.
That was probably the best-case scenario for them.
It was. They were usually allowed to leave peacefully, just without their weapons. But if the walls were breached,
Then it was a final, bloody battle inside the streets.
a violent, chaotic fight, or of course the attackers could just fail. They'd run out of supplies, or a relief army would show up and break the blockade, forcing them to retreat.
What's so fascinating is that all of this intricate engineering, the towers, the sapping, the physics of the trebuchet, it all came to an end because of one single invention:
Gunpowder.
gunpowder.
The arrival of cannons changed siege warfare from a game of months into a matter of days. They used explosive chemical power to fire heavy iron balls.
Which were far more destructive against stone than anything wood and rope could ever achieve.
It immediately forced architects to completely redesign castles.
Hmm.
Those high, thin walls that were great against trebuchets, they became totally obsolete. A cannonball just punched a hole right through them.
So the new fortresses became lower, thicker, and often had those star shapes.
Exactly, the trace Italian design, built to withstand and deflect the direct impact of cannon fire. It was really the end of the classic medieval castle.
So siege warfare was this complex, grueling challenge that was the perfect mix of medieval strategy, engineering, and just sheer human endurance.
It really was. And it's a compelling thought. Military architecture was completely reshaped simply because warfare shifted from relying on pure physics, that trebuchet counterweight, to relying on the chemistry of gunpowder.
Good luck with your studies.